Good morning, friends. I'm going to start this video outside the vehicle. What we're talking about today is fuel range, or battery range, I guess. You know, what is the amount of range that you actually need on a truck? People, in my opinion, online go back and forth, and you'll have anything from, you don't need more than 150 miles range to I need 1,000 miles range. Well, there are good logical reasons, I think, to have any of those opinions, but we're going to kind of use a little bit of math to determine what I think is actually the amount of range that you need. So, for a pickup truck application, I'm going to be using this as towing. I'm going to be using 7 miles per gallon, and that's because that's a pretty good, baseline, low-level, 3/4 ton, 1 ton gas truck towing, right? Most stuff's not going to dip too far below that. I've heard EcoBoost guys get into the 5s and 6s before. I know my Chevy towing stuff, this 05 Silverado with a 5.3 at the time, would sometimes dip below into the 6s, but I think 7 for a more modern vehicle, under most normal towing applications, will be in the 7s, at least, if not much higher, right? So with that, what is the number of range that you want? Well, there's 2 ways of looking at this, in my opinion. The 300 to 350 mile mark, which gives you, let's say, 270 to 320 of usable mileage with a little bit of buffer in there, is kind of the first gatepost that exists. And by that I mean that allows you to go what is, at least for me, a very full bladder span, and my legs are getting stiff and I just feel like getting out and walking around. That 300 mile mark for me, I'm pushing it. I like to be in the high 2s, stop, get out of the truck, do my thing. It's just much more comfortable that way. So if you're in that range, that gives you enough fuel to go 270 to 300 miles. To go 350 miles at 7 miles per gallon, that puts you at a 50-gallon gas tank, which a long bed F250 or 350 has 48. So you're right about there. Pretty darn close. That's pretty cool. I think the long bed Fords have what is the smallest tank a 3/4 ton or even maybe a half-ton truck should have. We'll get to that, my reasons for that in a second. So the second scenario is 400 to 450 miles. And you might say to yourself, oh, well, you just said that you don't need to stop, any shorter than 270 or longer than 270. Well, yes, I did just say that. But my reason for giving another kind of, scenario here is because if you're at that 400 to 450 mile mark, now, if you so chose, you could split that in half and stop only every other time you stop for fuel. So for example, if you've got younger kids, you've got a dog or two, maybe you've got an elderly, parent or grandparent you're traveling with, whatever it is, and they just need to stop and use the restroom more often, instead of having to jockey your trailer into a gas station every 200 miles because you have a small 34-gallon tank, you can instead choose to navigate into a simple rest stop, pop out quick, go to the bathroom, get back in, drive 200 more miles. Now, the cool thing about the 300 to 350 mile range tank size, which is 48 gallons, is that 400 to 450 mile range tank size is 64, so it is quite a bit bigger. But if you take that 48 gallons or that 50 gallons and bring 2 5-gallon containers, you're now at 60-ish gallons, so you're kind of somewhere in between. You can sort of still do this, and you could use your stock long bed tank with 10 gallons worth of fuel, and you could pour those extra 10 gallons in when you're at that rest stop because, the elderly person or whatever is using the restroom, your kid's using the restroom, you're walking the dog, your wife's doing whatever. You've got a little bit of time. You can dump 10 gallons of fuel in there quick. And then now all of a sudden, you can get that 200 mile back-to-back range, or 180 or 190 or whatever. And I think anybody with kids, I don't have kids, but anybody with kids can attest, if they're happy and they're sleeping in the car and they're entertained with their, iPad or whatever, don't move them and take them out of the vehicle if you don't have to. So if that means you don't have to stop, that is priceless, right? For taking kids on a road trip. So that fuel range could be the difference. It could save your marriage. Take that from a guy who's both not married and doesn't have kids. Anyway, the other big thing is, you know, kind of along those lines, you're not jockeying a big trailer into a gas pump or a diesel pump. Obviously, if you have diesel, it is much easier because you can go to the truck stops and use the big boy pumps, but they're also a lot more expensive because unless you have a fleet card and all that stuff. So, you know, there's a plus minus there, you know, of doing that. What else we got here? I think that covers most everything. Oh, one thing I wanted to mention lastly, this is going to be a shorter video. Everything that I just said applies to a diesel truck as well, right? So that 7 miles per gallon, I think for the diesel's sake might be 9 or 10, in which case those fuel numbers I just gave, you know, become 10 to 20% smaller. So now that 48 gallon long bed tank is plenty, probably for a lot of people. For myself, it probably would even be as well. So a long bed diesel, which is kind of more of a tow rig, right? There's a reason Ford made it the way they made it, and Chevy made something similar. Probably, I don't know if they have a bigger tank or not in the long beds. But, you know, so it does exist. Now, you would ask yourself, wow, if you're this picky about fuel range, why didn't you buy a long bed truck? So my F-250, as you can see here, I'll insert some video, is a short bed and has an auxiliary fuel tank in it. And you might say to yourself, wow, that was really dumb. You should have just bought a long bed. And I don't necessarily disagree. I probably should have bought a long bed in some sense, but I really didn't want the negatives of having a long bed, parking wise, you know, all that kind of stuff, lack of turning radius, when I don't really need the extra bed space. I fill the cab pretty good and I do fill the bed pretty good, but I've always been okay with this extended cab Silverado that I have, you know, previous to buying my crew cab short bed F-250. So I've got plenty more room already over this truck that I'm driving right now. So I didn't really feel the need to go all the way to a crew cab long bed. I didn't want an extended cab long bed, blah, 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 whatever. So that's kind of the logic behind that. So I wound up with the 53 gallons with that auxiliary tank. So I'm over that long bed, you know, stock fuel tank size, which is good enough for me. So, all right, it looks like I finally recorded this video in one take like I wanted to do without messing up too bad. So that'll end it. As always, guys, thanks for watching. God bless America, and I'll see you on the next one. Goodbye from a rainy upstate New York day.